My name is Charlene Margot, and I am co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture that brings you this program, the Parent Education Series, now in its 19th year. We are honored and delighted to have with us tonight Anthony Ross and Em Swanson. We'll be talking with you about parenting at the intersection of neurodivergence and gender expansiveness. Anthony and I have actually been doing this for almost 20 years together, so we are
Wow.
very happy to have Anthony and his colleague Em with us tonight. Please join me, everybody, in a really warm welcome for Anthony Ross and Em Swanson. Thank you both.
So thank you everybody who's come tonight, and I appreciate Charlene's introduction and even the Parent Venture for having these types of webinars for folks. It's really, really important information to have, and especially right now. So we're going to start out with a little bit more introductions about ourselves and give you a sense of what we're hoping for today. But while I do that, I actually want to encourage the folks who are here to really throw in any questions that you have into the chat or into the Q&A while we're doing our introductions and even throughout the webinar. And then also, if you feel comfortable enough, if you want to give us a sense of where you are, your location, and if you don't have questions, potentially to share maybe one or two hopes that you have for tonight, for what you'd like to get out of this, or what you're even a topic or a specific thing that you're wondering about or hope to get from. And feel free to throw that in as we go too. So again, pop in your questions, give us a couple of hopes that you have to get from tonight, share your location if you'd like to. Cool, Boston, right on. Thanks for being on. That's great and fun to see. Okay, so Em and I have been thinking about this and planning this for a little while now, and we're really hoping mostly to get to folks' questions or their hopes while we're here. We have things to cover. We could easily talk for an hour, each one of us alone, about both of these topics. And because we're only here for an hour, ideally we can get to what you're here for. So we're putting that out there. Throw out your questions. To start with me, you got most of my professional introduction there that Charlene read. I'll give you a little bit of my personal story just to be quick with it. So I'm the youngest of 6 kids from an Italian-Irish Catholic family and grew up in New York State, upstate New York in Poughkeepsie, and now live in Santa Cruz, California. And came out as a lesbian when I was about 19. And so that was like in the early 90s. And then spent, about really 20 years from there getting more familiar with myself, like people do as they're getting into their 20s and then their 30s. And in my 20s, really struggled a bit with gender, but not understanding so much about it, but knowing that I really like it. Oh, hello? Okay. Really just identifying as a butch lesbian, like more masculine lesbian at that point. And so then I spent my 30s really kind of questioning my own gender identity. I'll throw out and we'll talk about terms in a little bit. But by the time I was 38, I had really spent a lot of time trying to figure out who am I, what feels right. And so I began a social and a medical transition around 38, 39 years old. And at that time, that was like 2010, 2011. And so I transitioned to more of a masculine presentation, changed my name, did all that stuff, and have been really still learning about gender and what it means for me and just the expansiveness of that, regardless of how I present, because I know I look very masculine. And the point is I feel great. I feel very much in my body and more so than I ever have in my life. Now I'm 52 years old, and so we're hoping we start to feel this way by the time we hit our 50s, a little bit more grounded into who we are. But as a trans and a queer person who's constantly kind of watching and feeling into how I want to be in the world and how I want my quality of life to be really solid, that's always what I'm hoping for. And so it's a journey. It just keeps going. But it's been an amazing journey. I will add too, with my personal journey, as far as my own identities, it's also opened my eyes to a lot of my privileges, to a lot of things I didn't know, and that the fact that I will just keep learning, that I'm not always we're not gonna know everything, right? And so I learned a lot about my own white privilege. I learned a lot about my own abilities and my class privilege, and all of these things that have like, oh, okay, this is why this feels hard or this feels easier now, right? And that's why I was really happy to be able to work with M, because M has so much more experience in education personally and professionally around neurodivergence and autism. So they're really going to be able to speak to a lot of that much more than even I can. I'm like part of consultation groups where I'm still learning how to work with clients in the best way. So we're here, we're learning, we're both, I think would say we're not experts in any of this. I don't even know if I believe in experts in anything, but we definitely have a lot of information to share. So that's what we're going to do, hopefully today while we're here. Um, yeah, I think that's all I have to say about me. I'm going to hold it there and pass it over to M to introduce themselves.
Oh my gosh, Anthony, I'm just feeling so grateful for you. And it is really weird to talk and not see you all, but it's really wonderful to see what you're putting in the chat. Welcome. It's really wonderful to see that there's kiddos here, that there's someone who is wanting to adopt. So if you put information in, especially because we can't see you, it does help us kind of land with you all. It'd be sweet for those of you that want to share, if you are caregivers or parents, kind of the age, and a little bit about your kid. You're gonna see me rocking and moving because it's just something I do. I do a lot, and so that'll be happening throughout. My name's Emily Swanson. I go by M right now. I am also going to do a little bit more, kind of backtrack a little bit. I am non-binary and autistic, also ADHD. And I'm a parent of a 16-year-old trans and autistic kid who's in the other room playing Minecraft as we verily speak. And so I was born inside of an extraordinarily fundamentalist Christian environment, inside of an extraordinarily normative place in Southern California, and knew I was really weird really fast, and knew that I needed to work really hard to try to not be. So sort of any exploration of that got really shut down. My own journey with coming to terms with my own neurodivergence was really happened around the same time that learning my kiddo was autistic, which happened around, oh gosh, they were about 10 and started to do really, really poorly in school and started to really just crumble. They had a real mental health breakdown that I don't know if other people in this room have that experience, but I know it's really common for this population. And it was really through needing to radically change my whole life to orient to them and to their care, and to really becoming a listener. You know, Anthony said we're not experts, and we are not experts, but I think what we can do well is we listen well. And we are not afraid to change course based on what we're hearing from ourselves or from the people around us. And so my own kiddo had come out as gay, as lesbian earlier, a few years earlier, and then the mental health breakdown led to an autism diagnosis that really opened a lot of ways for us to think differently about how to build a life that worked for them and also better for me. And it was this experience of seeing things about them, like seeing myself in them, and this like really getting to know things about myself as I was supporting them. And so my own journey to becoming discovering that I was autistic happened along that same time. And I think that's really something that a lot of adult queer autistic folks have. It's sort of like this, we look for signs in our past. It's sort of like, oh, that means this now, that means this now. Fast forward to today, I work with primarily autistic and trans youth and young adults and parents, because I think, especially right now, having people at home, having a few people who are giving safety and connection, and you're going to hear those words safety and connection a lot tonight. If you leave with nothing else, safety and connection are the things that matter. And I think it can be really hard to focus on that when you've got an IEP and gender stuff and all these other pieces. It can feel like those need to be addressed first, and they will happen. And so something's happening to me that often happens to me, which my brain goes a little white. And so I might have to take just a minute and kind of be like, okay, what else do I want to say here? I think the invitation of parenting and of caregiving as a neurodivergent person, because I know there's some neurodivergent folks, parents in this room, and parenting folks who are gender and neuro expansive is like deep liberation and deep creativity. There's a level of joy and aliveness that I think can come when we are really able to be with what happens. And there's also a lot of parenting without a map and not knowing the thing to do in the moment. And there's a lot of working with systems that don't see and don't appreciate what's happening with you or your child. And so I think part of my hope in being here is just to really let you all know, you know your child better than anyone else. You know them, you're the expert in them. No matter what anyone else says, really. And I think that's about all I'm going to say. I think the one other thing I'll say is my postgraduate training is eco-psychology. I do a lot of work with nature and folks, and it's my orientation that both neurodiversity and gender expansiveness are really critical aspects of biodiversity and important for all of life. And so really glad you're all here and just loving what's in the chat here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Em. Yeah, I'm loving it too, just trying to keep up with all of the chat and scanning the questions coming in the Q&A too. So as I'm looking at them, I think, and you can let me know, Em, if you want to hop in, if you have a different plan, but I'm going to go with our agenda. I'm going to cover some basics.
I think I'm just going to write down certain things I'm seeing that I want to track, and then yeah.
Cool. Okay. Okay. So there's a couple of things that I'm just going to throw out there as we're talking and still looking at your questions and hopes as you fill in the chat and the Q&A. These two subjects are huge, right? So, and we have now 40 minutes to go. No way that we can cover everything that we'd like to. We're going to skim over some basics, answer your questions, give you the resource page. I think Bev might have already put it in to the chat, but we can throw it in again later. But we really want to leave you with some information and a lot of resources that will bring you to other resources that might be helpful to answer your questions that we don't get to today or that we don't get to enough. But that's our plan for today. The first thing we both wanted to share too, one of the first things is, as you think about gender diversity and neurodiversity, we basically have to unlearn pretty much everything we learned about both of those things. And speaking about like that there's gender binary, that there's only two, even sex, that there's only two is not actually scientifically factual. And that we all have the same kind of brains in the way that we think and are in the world, or at least somewhere are closer to some sense of normal, which there is no normal, and there really is such an expanse of how our brains operate that we barely know. And so we're just really, as parents and as adults in a world where we're trying to really support kids, we have to be willing to let go of what we think is normal, or what we think, or what we were told is normal, and what the mainstream or how things should be, in order to begin to really be the best support for our youth and young adults and our friends and our adults who are actually understanding themselves better as trans or neurodiverse or both, right? Unlearn, right? Let go. A lot of what we're going to be talking about is letting go of what we thought we knew. So that's one. The other one is that a couple of the takeaways that we want you to go with. Just believe your kids. Just believe what your kids are saying. Believe what they're telling you. A lot of people get stuck in like, I think my kid's trying to manipulate to get this or to do that, right? Or they're just, especially like with PDA and different things, are like this, they're just, it's unruly. It's not okay that, or they're learning from other kids and they're just trying to do this. And while there may be at times an element to that, in my experience, and now this is going on like 30 years with young people, they're not, they're not. They're actually just trying to get us to see them better. They're trying to get the adults in their world to hear them and see them and really see them deeply. And they're doing it in any way they can figure out how, right? And so takeaway, believe your kids, and we'll expand on that. And then, like Emmett had mentioned, safety and connection. Like, you don't need to understand all the language. You don't need to know every term. You don't need to know what every resource is. You don't need to have that. As long as you have a sense of openness and safety and connection with your kid at home, that's the foundation you have to start from. And that will really carry them as you gather information, and get them what they need. Safety and connection is key, always. So those are like the three takeaways. Unlearn what you learned, believe your kid, provide safety and connection as best you can, and the rest is going to come together. So those are the three main things. Anything you want to add, Em?
I was just about to reach for like the one that does all the 100 emojis a million times. So, um, absolutely. I think like 100 emoji to what you just said. And I think the thing that I want to say about safety and connection, and especially any kids, but kids who are living multiple marginalized identities. And I saw that there's a lot of folks here who are BIPOC. So there's knowing that they are going to come to you not only when they're 5, not only when they're 6, but when they're 16, when they're 18, when they're 22, is like one of the most important things. And so I think that safety and connection and believing them. Yeah, it's kind of like the spine down everything else. And especially when they're not going to be believed, and there will be such a lack of safety and connection in so many places that they have to move in the world. So now I'm going to do the 100 emoji.
Okay. All right. So I think I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to do the brief overview around gender diversity. That's one part of our agenda. Then the next part, Em is going to take and talk a little bit of the culture and overview around neurodiversity. And we're going to keep trying to like scan for your questions and what you're asking for so that we can leave enough time to at least touch on some of them or all of them. And my sense is a lot of people probably understand the basics of gender diversity, but I'm going to throw it out there in that it's an oversimplified and overgeneralized way, but it's the best way to just pull it together. We understand gender identity and expression, right? So gender identity is that sense of being a boy or a girl or genderqueer or androgynous or gender fluid or something else, right? Like that their gender is one of those things. And there's an identity in there. And it's just a knowing about who you are. Gender expression is the like our outward appearance. It's the clothes we wear. It's the way we move in the world physically. There's ways that kind of present what we know ourselves to be as far as our gender goes. And this is interesting for a lot of people, especially people who identify or know themselves to be cisgender, which would mean you were born with genital parts that somebody said is a man and you feel like a man. Your gender identity is a man, right? Everything aligns. That you present a certain way, your gender every day. Like everybody performs their gender or presents their gender expression by the clothes they wear. Facial hair or not, length of your hair, right? All these different things that kind of show who we are. And so that's the same thing for trans and gender diverse people. Like everybody just presents a gender in a certain way. And sometimes it changes throughout the day or throughout a week or whatever, right? Like there's this way that we'd like to show who we are to people. In our world, when we still look at things as a binary, it really limits everybody into a certain box of what we think something like what masculinity looks like or what femininity looks like. And that is exactly who you are, but expression can go all over the place too. Okay. So there's gender identity, there's gender expression. There's sex or biological sex that you probably have heard people identify, it'd say someone is assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. Sometimes you hear that as AMAB or AFAB, right? Which basically means, like I mentioned earlier, a baby is born, say they have the genitalia that is a penis, and we identify that as male. Right? Doctors will say this is a boy, right? If a baby is born without a penis and with a vulva, then they'll say this is a baby is a female. That's how we name that baby, right? There's also a whole category of humans and other animals, right, that actually identify or are identified more in a variation of sex. So maybe have both types of genitalia, inside or outside, or there's like many different variations. Now, this is a whole different, it's not a whole different thing, but we don't have enough time to go into this, but one of the terms is intersex. There's more often and more recently, people are saying differences of sex development. The medical community would say disorders of sex development, but the community would say differences. And there's like 23 to 25, as far as I understand, different like sex development that can happen, again, internally or externally. So there really isn't just boy babies and girl babies. There's like variation within our biology as well. And that's sex, right? And then the last kind of term I'll throw out there that sometimes people get kind of mixed in or mixed up with is sexual orientation or who people are attracted to, right? And so that's where when you hear the LGBTQ kind of acronym, lesbian, gay, bisexual. Those are all sexual orientations. They're like words that some people use to describe who they're attracted to, right? Transgender, the T in the LGBT, is about gender identity, right? And then there's two spirit. Sometimes you'll see 2S in the LGBT or the 2S LGBT, which includes folks who are actually from indigenous cultures who have understood gender identity and attraction to be more of an expanse than Western cultures have, like for a long, long time. So that's another part of that acronym. And again, some terms. So I'm basically talking about terminology, and hopefully I'm not confusing people more or boring you because you already know this. But that's some of the pieces around understanding gender and sexual orientation and like the difference, right? One is gender is who we know we are, and sexual orientation is who is about attraction towards other people, if we even have an attraction, because people also identify as asexual and agender. So again, throwing out terms, don't get lost into them. It's okay to not understand, and they're easily found in Google these days. I think I'm going to leave it at that for the basics since we're at 6 o'clock, and I want to get to the neuroqueer and neurodiverse part 2. Does that feel good to you?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, what Anthony said, we really want to hear your questions and give as much time as possible for answering questions. So I'm going to say a little bit, and what I'm going to say is a little bit. Like I'm not, it's a drop in the ocean of what there is to know. And I think where I want to start is around the intersection between neurodivergence and trans, queer, gender expansive, sexually expansive. It's a big intersection. There's a lot of research and there's a lot of different numbers out there. One recent one is that 60% of people that identify as trans or non-binary are also neurodivergent. And so there's a lot of what do I want to say? There's a lot of intersections. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of reasons why this may or may not be. There's research being done. We can talk about that if folks have questions about that. But I think a place that is important is for me is where these two kind of streams come together in a body. There's so many pieces. One is often for autistic people in particular, also ADHD, but there's so much information inside the body that is hard to understand, can be hard to interpret. And then if you add on that a gender experience that is where your inner experience is not matching how the outer world is experiencing you, this creates just a lot of confusion in a nervous system that can show up in ways that look like chronic pain, that can look like not being able to go to school, that can look like it looks like so many different ways. There's as many different ways as it looks as there are people experiencing it. But one thing that we do know is that it's sort of like they're kind of holding hands where oftentimes the more someone's gender comes more into alignment with how they feel on the inside, maybe something that might have been spoken about as part of an autistic or a neurodivergent issue gets quieter. Not because that issue was dealt with, but because the noise in the system has been taken down and there's more room for change to happen. I got a little ahead of myself there. I want to back up and talk quickly just about neurodiversity and where that term came from and what it means. Neurodiversity actually first came into the lexicon in I think it was 1998, by a journalist named Harold Bloom, not neurodivergent. He's writing an article, and he said that neurological diversity is part of biological diversity. And that really stuck. And then someone named Judy Singer, who self-identified as being autistic, used that and called herself, used the neurodiversity term. And it really gave the community a way to start to talk about itself that wasn't pathologized, that wasn't using pathology language. And then the term neurodivergent came on the scene by, oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to pronounce her name right. If I can find it, I'll put it in the chat, by an autistic activist. And the term neurodivergent really also increased the ability of people whose neurology is different to start to talk about themselves and put themselves in the conversation in a way that wasn't as less than or defective or deficient, but different, and different actually in an important way. The whole idea around the neurodiversity paradigm also really took its playbook from the disability justice movement, which locates disability inside of systemic oppression, not inside of a person's individual ability to do or not do something. So again, it's a really different orientation to what's happening inside of someone. It's a really empowering way to look at it. And it's a really social justice orient, like its roots, the roots of the neurodiversity paradigm are in social justice. Justice for all bodies, justice for all minds, always a being. I want to just kind of look and see questions, statistics about percentage of transgender folks. Yeah, so 60% is one of the more recent ones. There's a lot of controversy, and I think there's more conversation in the community about why this is. There's a lot of reasons. One is that neurodivergent brains tend to have a whole lot more connectivity than allistic brains. And so there's a theory that because of that intensity of connectivity, there is less of a understanding really, or holding to binaries. In our culture in general, including gender binary or sexuality binary. They just don't make as much sense to a neurodivergent brain. Another theory, and it's probably a relationship of, there's probably many more than one, but another theory is just that sort of once you're outside the dominant culture in one area, it becomes easier to think about and take on ways of being that are also outside the dominant culture, because that threat of being different when you are inside is so great that sometimes it makes it impossible to even think about things that we might be. I know that was my experience growing up. A few things as parents of or caregivers of trans and neurodivergent kids that's so important is, one, the impact of having multiple marginalized identities just on a body, especially in this climate. It has an impact. And so I'm curious, I know from my own teen, and I have permission to talk about this, he struggles with really intense chronic pain, has several dynamic disabilities. That means some days movement is possible and some days movement is not possible. And so there's a lot of issues around things like chronic pain, fibromyalgia, there's a lot of words and diagnosis given to it for how we move in the world. So if that's your experience, you're definitely not alone. I think, what else do I want to say here? Oftentimes with kids who are trans or gender expansive and autistic, experiences that are more connected to what's happening in the gender, the sexuality, or more connected to what's happening in the autistic can be used as a way to shut down the other. Of you're just doing that, like say a kid wants to wear clothes that help them become more aligned with how their gender feels inside of them. Well, if they don't have people around them that know what's happening, they might say, you're just doing that because you're autistic. Well, that's not actually what's happening. And so, really opening up to if you have a child who is queer or trans, or to really keep an open question. Is there also neurodivergence here? Because there's a high chance there is. And if you have a kid where there's neurodivergence present, to really keep an open question of, is there, did I say neurodivergence? I did. Is there trans and queerness here? Because oftentimes we have so many biases inside of ourselves, and we don't even know what we are not listening to and not making available in the relationship. And so the more ways that you can open the like lens of what's possible, what might be happening with the people that you love that are having this experience, then the more they're going to be able to really be themselves. But that happens a lot where, and maybe then someone who is queer or trans might like not want to wear certain clothes because of XYZ. And if someone isn't holding the possibility that there might be a neurodivergence there, they might think it's because of the gender piece, where actually it might be sensory overwhelm, or it might be something else that has to do with a neurodivergent way of being in the world. So I think this piece of just really being curious, asking a lot of questions, and really being aware of our biases. Our biases are in our bones, it's in the water of our culture, and we kind of don't know them until they smack us in the face. And so I think another thing for me also is being really willing to be like, I got it wrong. I want to understand. Tell me that again. And really, we are the learners. You know, Anthony talked about a lot of what we do is unlearn. And I think that's really true. And a lot of what we do is learn, and we're actually learning from our kids. What we're doing is letting them lead, which is a different role. I think the other thing that feels really important, especially for caregivers, and I know I still struggle with this, is community. It can be, it's hard to find community. It's hard to find community in this, where for when you have trans and neurodivergent or LGBTQ at gender expansive, whatever words, and neurodivergent kids. And it's so important. It's so important. One, we feel saner. It's can be more labor to call someone who doesn't have this going on in their life, doesn't have a kid, or any, and say, this is hurting, I don't know, like I'm having a hard time. And it can feel more isolating to reach out and be received by someone who doesn't get it. So finding people that get it is really important for so many reasons, for you, for your kids, surrounding your kid with community, and finding community for yourself. And there are places in our resource stock, we have some places that offer that. And I think I'll stop there and leave time for questions.
Anthony and Em, I really want to thank you for this incredible conversation, looking at everything in chat. First of all, thank you everybody for sharing amazing stories and talk about community. You know, we didn't know that this would become a place of community, but it kind of has. So I think that I'm going to start by asking a question that just came in, and I think it's a really good one, which is, how do you initiate conversation with your child about gender that doesn't come across as intrusive? It appears that the child really wants to talk about it, but I don't know how to support them when he won't share what he's experiencing.
You want me to jump on that first, then? Or
Yeah, you
can
can.
I
I have
say?
a couple of thoughts, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be quick. I think, depending on how old your kid is, but preteen or teen, even early 20s, 16. Okay. It's a it's difficult to talk with teens often, no matter how they identify, right? It's difficult to get adults to be vulnerable about something, um, because for, well, various reasons, right? So the easiest, quickest answer I can give of is it for this question is patience on your part, right? Um, the taking a drive or walking side by side, talking openly about things and just reminding your kid over and over again, like, hey, I know that there's things you're thinking about, and I would love to hear them whenever you're ready, right? Like, talk with me. If there's something I don't know, it's okay. I want to support you when you're ready, right? And really giving them the space to know, like, they can share it when they're ready. You can't force a teen to talk about the thing, even if you know it and you see it and you see them struggling. You can't get there if they're not ready. And it's a journey. So those are the couple of thoughts that I have. I can talk about it longer, but the side by side or the taking a drive or we're doing something where you're not looking at each other face to face, but being there together and just keep reminding them I'm here if you want to talk about it. What do you
So,
got, Em? Or
Can I just say one thing here really quick? So Anthony and I have known each other a long time because I've really been interested in his work and especially through this outlet program with ACS, incredible program that still continues. The point is, he did an event with us in person years ago at Sequoia High School. And I never will forget a parent standing up in this community of about 35 parents who said, I've never been able to talk about my child in public. And Anthony, about, 10 years ago, I was in grad school again, came to you and did a project, wrote about trans kids. And you said to me, well, but parents are really been part of the problem. But I think the tide is turning, right? The parents know they can be part of the solution now. I feel it tonight. What do you and Em have to say to that?
yeah. To that part, definitely parents are shifting and opening more and wanting to know more, depending in certain areas. I also still work with a lot of parents who don't want to, who have the block, right? They think they understand to a point, and that's all they need to go to. And it's harder to get them sometimes to kind of cross over that line to like, wait, no, but there's more, right? There's more to understand with your kids. So it's all still happening that way as far as I see it with the parents that I work with now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Em, you were trying to say something. I'm sorry.
Um, I've been tracking the questions. I think the thing that I wanted to say was one, I heard that story when we were prepping for this, and I'm so moved by it. And I think that's one reason we wanted to do this is so many we need places as parents to be
Mhm.
able to be in our own journey because we are in a journey alongside our children. And a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to be in that journey because we think I have to, there's not time for this because I have to take care of them. And often that can be true, but the more places where that kind of thing can happen, is so important. And I also work with parents who have a hard time letting go of what like we thought we were in this one direction. Like
Mhm.
this was what we thought was going to happen. And and so I think, one of the most important things as parents that we can do is be willing to leave normal. I use it, like really be willing to leave that, to just drop it and go off the well-beaten trail. The well-beaten trail is really comfortable. You know where you're going to go. You know the milestones. The people around you are hitting those same milestones. There's some comfort there. There's some kid security there. And it's hard to leave that, which I think is why finding community is so important. But I was just going to say, Anthony, a little bit what you said is my kiddo did not want to talk about their sexuality or their gender or set or anything. I was the parent that was like, I'm going to be like pro sex, and I was like on it. I was doing it. And I would like slide the book under, and I would find it like shoved in the corner of their room, like spider webs. So I'd slide another book on it, and it's the same thing. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and I was starting to get worried and thinking I wasn't doing my job. And I think for a lot of people, especially if they are neurodivergent and have gender stuff, they're doing so much work inside. They do so much inside of themselves. And for many of them, they need to really land it in themselves before they're going to bring it out. And I think as a parent, like really honoring whatever that internal timing is. And there's a phrase in the neurodivergent world of assuming competency. And what that means is it means if you are doing something and I don't understand what you're doing, it doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to assume that you have a very good reason for it and you do know what you're doing and you're doing something important. So assuming competency doesn't mean I'm assuming they can do the thing I'm expecting them to do. That's assuming performance and control. Assuming competency is assuming that the person knows what they need and they're doing what they need to do to get it. It's like a deep amount of respect and trust. And so I would say that piece in the gender, like assuming competency, and then making it say, when you're here, I'm here. And if you want to do it, I didn't just keep shoving books under and finding them.
Well, and so we have some questions about, again, you mentioned the journey, both you and Anthony. So one of the questions really is around, kids try on identities. They may be, identified male at birth, and then they want to be trying to be a girl for a year and a half. How do parents support their kids as they're going on that journey back and forth? Because it's confusing for the parents and the neighbors and the teachers and everybody.
Yeah. Again, it's similar stuff. It's really, well, the first thing is like Em was saying, find support and education for yourself as a parent, right? Find other parents who have kids who are expressing gender in a different way than what we're thinking they should, right? Talk to them. There's a lot of stuff online. We have the resource page that Bev sent out, and you can look at that. And those resource links, you can click on those and you will find other links too. So definitely that's just a starting point, the resource page, but find support for yourself. Read some of the books, the blogs, the podcasts, like get a sense of like, what is this? And then like really, again, the safety and the love, just trust that they know what they're doing. And I know I remember read in one of the chats, it's like, I'm afraid that the kids, might be being pressured or bullied to present in a certain way, right? Which is hard because we can't be there all the time as the adults. And that's like a whole other thing as far as school culture and safety and things like that. But providing the safety for your kid to be home and present as they want to, right? So giving them the space, say, look, I think some of these things might be happening at school. We love you. You can be whoever you want to be and how you are every day, even if it's different when you're home. We love you. We don't care, right? Like allowing that space at home. And then I saw another question, and I'll save that for a minute, but how to work with the schools or who to contact. And so we'll get to that because that's another piece of it for the parent. But my first answers are find support for yourself from other parents and organizations and get education. And then you can be there with the love and safety and connection for your kiddo.
Okay, thank you for that, Anthony, because I know there were a number of questions about finding community, which sounds good, but it's probably harder than it seems at first. Or I know you've given us great leads. Thank you for those.
Yeah, I want to jump in about a couple things. One, a lot of parents have flagged PDA, and I want to just say a piece about PDA, and then the piece about community. it's hard.
And would you define PDA real quick,
Yeah.
I think just for folks who don't know.
So PDA is defined as pathological demand avoidance. And it's also been defined, which I actually think is actually more accurate and real, which is a pervasive desire for autonomy. Australia and England are a lot farther along than we are in how they orient to PDA, how they see it, and just how it is in their communities. We're really playing catch up here. It's considered right now to be a subtype of autism. My kiddo's PDA, I have a fair amount. And it's also on a continuum. It's sort of like, it's like anything where some people we can be very, some people were like, yeah, I'm here on a bad day. But what PDA is, it's a nervous system that has a heightened, and by heightened, I mean hair trigger threat response to any perceived threat to personal autonomy. And that can be coming from the inside of someone. It can be like, I want to do an art project, but that lands in their nervous system as a demand. And so they want to do something and then can't do something. Or you need to do your homework, or you need to take a shower, or I want to eat.
Well, that's where this hygiene piece comes in.
So PDA is, it's real. It's very difficult for a parent because literally none of the usual parenting stuff works. In fact, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. And so with PDA kids, it can be really hard because they can actually really want to take a shower. This happens in my home. I want you to know this, but can't. And it's not that they won't, it's that they can't. And that's this big switch. It's this paradigm switch as a parent to get into of they're not being disrespectful, they're not manipulating, they're not lying. They are in a trauma response and they're in a freeze response. And I know we're getting close to time, so I would say in terms of PDA North America has really great resources. There's an organization called At Peace Parents that I really love. They do younger children really well. I think they're getting to the teen. And I think that safety and connection is just so important. And workarounds, like with kids with hygiene, get baby wipes. Get baby wipes. Have them in the car, have them in the kitchen, have them in their bedroom, have them in the bathroom. Like if food is an issue, get bars. Like get everything that can lessen the demands as much as possible. And you may have to get okay with a stinky kid for a while. It's not going to kill anyone. No one's going to die. And what's going to happen is they're going to learn mom loves me, dad loves me, even when I can't do these things. And that is like gold. That is like the gold that you want. So that's all I'll say about PDA. But it's hard as a parent. It's really hard because it's a radical reorientation.
Thank you. People are saying, yeah, it's hard to uncover that and hard to identify it. I just realized that my computer consultant is that, and I didn't know why it was such a struggle. Well, this has been incredible, you two, and I wish we had another hour because I feel like we're just starting and everyone has told amazing stories and asked amazing questions. But given that we've got just a couple minutes, Anthony and Em, I'd love you to just give us some concluding remarks, what you want us to take away from today, in whichever order the two of you prefer.
You want me to go? Okay.
Anthony, we're going to start with you.
I always have thoughts. Here's what I want to throw out. I'll read the unlearn what you learned. Believe your kid. Provide safety and connection all the time. And that includes for you as the parents, right? Find safety and connection for yourselves because both of these, trying to raise autistic and neurodivergent kids in this world right now is terrifying. We need each other, we need community. So go to the resource page, click on some of those links, use the resources we left. Find the people in your community in person that you can talk to. So talk to the local LGBT organizations or the trans organizations in your community or as close to you as possible. Talk to the staff there to find out how to work with the schools, who to talk to, what politicians to talk to. Some of your organizations are going to be the best places to start to figure out, how do I support my kid, or how do I find support for myself in your community? So I'm going to leave there.
Thank you, Anthony. Great
Yeah.
advice. Easier said than done.
Yeah, right. I just really echo a lot of what Anthony said of trust your kid, safety and connection for yourselves and for your children. Trust yourselves, really trust yourselves. You actually know what to do. And I think where we can get tangled up is where we know what to do, but our social conditioning comes in and tells us that we should be doing something else. And then we kind of get in a spin. So I would say trust yourselves, and be really willing to make mistakes. There is no right way through this. There is only getting through it. And in terms of community, so important, and it takes a while to build, and it's sort of like you'll find one person and they might be connected to a few more, and so then you're going to get connected to a few more. So it's sort of like finding one or two people, and maybe that's at school, or maybe there's an autistic support group, because I guarantee you if you're in one of those, there's gonna be trans and queer, and if you're in a trans and queer, then there's gonna be so you can take advantage of that crossover. And really all it takes is like one or two, and it grows from there. Yeah, just really feeling, I think I just feel very fiercely grateful that you're all here. It's a big deal to want to come. It's a big deal to take an hour, and want to show up for your kids in this way. Thank you.
Well, and the last comments here in chat, Emily and Anthony, I want you to know how much people appreciate this, that we've had this conversation. They don't feel as alone because they're struggling. But again, I think today we've really given space. That's one of the reasons why I started this program, is to talk about things that I knew that schools couldn't necessarily do, but that we knew needed to happen. So again, we are so grateful to you both. We're so grateful to everybody who's been on today. Thank you for all the beautiful comments and chats and for being so vulnerable and open, everybody. This is not the last time we will talk about this. So again, thank you to Anthony Ross and Em Swanson for really a beautiful discussion you've led us through and opening a lot of eyes and hearts. So you've done great work tonight.